Okay, so we're diving into this wild legal situation with Diddy.
Yeah. It's a bit of a head scratcher, even for, someone like me who follows this stuff all the time.
$100 million judgment against him. A default judgment. And Diddy's people are saying they didn't even know about it until the news broke.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, and it all stems from accusations made by a Michigan inmate.
And the details, man.
Tell me about it. Where do we even start? So this inmate is alleging that Diddy sexually assaulted him.
Right, and we have to acknowledge these are serious allegations.
Absolutely. Incredibly serious.
And to make it even more complicated, the accuser himself, he's a convicted felon with a history of sexual assault charges.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean he's not telling the truth about Diddy.
No, not at all, but it definitely adds another layer to everything, And then there's the whole default judgment thing.
And the amount.
Yeah.
$100 million. Like, even for Diddy, that's got to hurt.
Well, yeah, for anyone. Right.
Right, of course, but you know what I mean.
Totally. But the thing is, with a default judgment, it basically means the court ruled against Diddy because he didn't respond to the lawsuit.
And we're assuming he would have responded to this, right? I mean, $100 million.
You'd think so, right? Which makes you wonder, what actually happened here? Because default judgments, they happen, but not usually for this much money, and definitely not without what's called a prove-up hearing.
A prove-up hearing. So, what is that exactly?
It's basically where the plaintiff, in this case the inmate, has to convince the judge that the amount they're asking for is justified.
Oh, I see.
They got to show evidence and everything.
So, in a case like this, with such a huge amount of money on the line, you're saying that usually doesn't just get skipped over.
Yeah, it's very unusual.
Wow. Okay. So we've got serious accusations, a complicated history with the accuser, this massive judgment, and a legal process that sounds, I don't know, maybe a little off.
Yeah, to say the least.
So where do we even go from here? What happens next?
Well, Diddy's team, they're not just letting this go.
Yeah, which, I mean, can you blame them? $100 million.
Nope, not at all. From what I'm seeing, it sounds like they're really honing in on how this lawsuit was served in the first place.
Right, because their whole thing is they're saying they had no idea this was even happening.
Exactly. They're claiming they were never properly served.
Okay, so now I feel like we need a little legal lesson here because served. What does that actually mean in this context?
Yeah, good point. It can get confusing. So, service of process. That's basically the official way the plaintiff, the one bringing the lawsuit, lets the defendant know, hey, you're being sued.
So it's not like just, sending a text or something.
Not even close. It's got to be official, documented, proof that the defendant actually received those legal papers.
And this is where things get interesting, because I was reading that the inmate said he served Diddy at this address in Michigan.
Right. And that's where the problem is.
But Diddy hasn't lived there in ages. Years and years.
Yeah, and if that's true, if Diddy's team can actually prove that they were never properly served, well, that throws a wrench in the whole thing.
Because it's you can't respond to a lawsuit if you don't know it exists.
Exactly. It all comes back to due process. The idea that everyone, no matter who they are, deserves a fair chance to defend themselves.
Makes sense.
And if Diddy never even knew about this lawsuit, well, then he wasn't given that chance.
So we're not just talking about whether Diddy did what he's accused of, but whether the rules were followed, period.
Exactly. And Diddy's team is calling this fraud on the court. It's a serious claim, basically saying someone messed with the legal process on purpose.
And they seem to think the inmate might be trying to pull a fast one.
Right.
So especially with his history of lawsuits.
Right, and that's a big part of their argument. But, and this is important, we only have one side of the story right now.
Of course.
We don't know what the plaintiff would say about all of this or what's in those official court documents.
Right.
But if Diddy's team can prove improper service or, even worse, fraud on the court.
It's not looking good for the plaintiff.
Not at all. It could mean the whole judgment gets thrown out,
Wow. But even if that happens, even if the judgment goes away, doesn't mean this is over, does it?
Nope. This whole thing could just start all over again.
Oh, man.
The plaintiff could refile, this time making sure everything's done exactly right.
And then what? It would go to trial?
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah.
And then a jury would have to decide if they believe the accusations against Diddy.
So we've got this huge question mark hanging over everything. Is the judgment going to stand? Are we going to trial? What's going to happen? So much up in the air right now.
Right. It's like we're watching a legal drama unfold in real time.
Totally. And the thing is, even with everything in limbo, there are still some very real consequences happening right now for Diddy.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're talking about that $100 million.
Right. It's not like that money's just chilling, waiting for a decision.
Not at all.
Because we talked about that payment plan laid out in the judgment.
$10 million a year.
$10 million, starting October 1st.
It's a lot of pressure.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Even if you were sure you could get the judgment tossed out.
Yeah, that's got to be weighing on him, on his business, everything.
Talk about high stakes. And, this case, it's not just about Diddy. Like, if his team's right about all this, if the judgment really was made improperly...
It could have ripple effects.
Exactly. Think about other celebrities, other big cases.
Huge. It could change how courts approach these situations, maybe even lead to more protections against, frivolous lawsuits.
And really emphasize that whole due process thing.
Absolutely. This case really highlights how important due process is. It's the foundation of a fair legal system, you know? And when that's compromised, it's a problem for everyone.
Definitely makes you think. So as we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts for our listeners? What should we be taking away from all of this?
It's tricky, right? Because on one hand, we have these incredibly serious allegations.
Right.
And we always want to support victims and make sure they feel safe coming forward.
Of course.
But at the same time, we can't just forget about due process. Everyone deserves a chance to defend themselves, no matter who they are or what they're accused of.
It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. And that's not always easy.
No, not at all. So what do we do? What can our listeners do while we wait to see how this plays out?
I think the biggest thing is just to, stay informed, but be careful about what you see and hear.
Good advice in this day and age.
Right. Don't jump to conclusions based on headlines or one social media post. Remember, there are always multiple sides to a story.
And things are rarely as simple as they seem.
Never. Especially in the legal world.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this deep dive has been a wild ride.
To say the least.
And it doesn't sound like it's over yet.
Not even close, I'm sure.
We'll definitely have to revisit this one. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another fascinating story.